The final out was recorded at 9:23 p.m. By 9:44, Kyle Hart's locker was empty. Not packed by Hart himself. Not cleared out gradually over the course of an evening the way these things normally happen, the slow, private process of a player gathering his belongings with the quiet dignity that professional athletes try to maintain even in the worst moments of their careers. Empty in the specific, administrative way that announces itself immediately to everyone who walks into a clubhouse and understands what an empty locker means before anyone has said a single word. The nameplate was gone. The personal items were gone. The particular arrangement of equipment and clothing and the small objects that players use to make an anonymous locker feel like their own space, all of it gone. Removed with the efficiency of an organization that had made its decision before the game ended and was simply completing the physical reality of it 20 minutes after the final out. Dave Roberts had designated Kyle Hart for assignment. In a clubhouse that was still processing a loss. In a room where 25 other players were sitting with the particular heaviness of a game that had slipped away in the late innings. In the middle of a birthday celebration that had been planned for weeks and was supposed to begin within the hour. 20 minutes. That was how long Roberts had waited. Long enough for the formalities to be completed. Not long enough for anyone to pretend this was anything other than what it was. A message. Delivered in the language that professional sports organizations speak most fluently. An empty locker. To understand what happened in those 20 minutes, you have to understand what happened in the 4 innings before them. Hart had been given the ball in the 6th. The Dodgers were trailing by 1, close enough that a strong performance could reframe the entire narrative of the evening, could give the offense the platform it needed to produce the kind of late-inning response that this lineup is capable of generating when the situation demands it. He had retired the first batter. Efficiently, on 3 pitches, a ground out to second that suggested the evening might go differently than it ultimately did. And then the second batter reached on a single. And the third batter walked. And before anyone in the dugout had fully processed the shift from the first batter's ground out to the suddenly complicated situation now developing on the bases, Kyle Hart was in trouble of the specific variety that reveals things about a pitcher that better circumstances tend to conceal. Not mechanical trouble. The stuff was there, the velocity readings were normal, the movement on his secondary pitches was what it had been in his better outings. What was absent was something harder to quantify and therefore harder to fix from the dugout. The composure that a pitcher needs to have, not just to throw strikes, but to throw the right strikes at the right moment to the right location against hitters who know exactly what the situation means and are hunting accordingly. 4 runs crossed the plate before Roberts made the call to the bullpen. 4 runs that, in the accounting of the final score, represented the margin of defeat. 4 runs that, in the specific geography of where they came from, not from poor pitch selection or defensive miscues or the kind of bad luck that every pitcher encounters and most survive, came from something the people watching could see but the person on the mound could not seem to access. The ability to stop it. The secret behind the 4 runs emerged gradually, in the specific way that secrets emerge in a baseball clubhouse, through fragments, through the careful language of people who know more than they are saying and are deciding in real time how much to release. What became clear, as those fragments assembled themselves into something coherent, was that the situation Hart had faced in the 6th inning was not entirely the result of events that occurred in the 6th inning. It had roots. The 3rd and 4th runs, the ones that broke the game open in the way that certain runs break games open, not just adding to a deficit but changing the psychological temperature of an entire stadium, came directly from a sequence of pitches that Hart had thrown to the 2 batters preceding them. Pitches that, according to the game-calling structure the Dodgers operate with, should not have been thrown. Sequences that deviated from the plan that had been established before the inning began. Deviations that were small enough individually to be explained as in-game adjustments but significant enough collectively to suggest something else. A pitcher making independent decisions in a moment that called for the opposite of independence. The catcher had visited the mound twice during the inning. Brief visits, the kind that are as much about resetting attention as communicating information. The kind that say, you know what you're supposed to do. Do that. Hart had nodded both times. And then, on the pitches that followed each visit, had done something different from what the nod had agreed to. 4 runs. The game was effectively over before the seventh inning began. And Roberts, who sees everything and forgets nothing, had seen all of it. The DFA was announced internally before it was announced officially. Roberts told Hart directly, in his office, with the door closed, in the private way that these conversations happen when they are handled with the basic human decency that the situation, regardless of its circumstances, still deserves. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Those who were nearby, who could not hear the words but could observe the body language of both men when the door opened afterward, described what they saw simply. Roberts looked like a man who had done something difficult and was at peace with having done it. Hart looked like a man who had not expected the conversation to end the way it ended. He had perhaps expected a different kind of conversation. A performance review. A discussion of adjustments. The kind of meeting that leads to another opportunity rather than the closing of one. What he received instead was clarity. The kind that does not leave room for negotiation or revision or the recasting of events into a more favorable interpretation. He was done in Los Angeles. Hart's retaliation came 40 minutes later. He had not left the facility immediately. He had lingered, in the training room, in the hallway near the clubhouse, in the specific liminal space that people occupy when they have received news they have not yet decided how to respond to. Moving without apparent destination. Processing. And then, in that processing, something shifted. He spoke to a reporter. Not through official channels. Not with the consent of the organization he was technically still employed by for the duration of the DFA process. Directly, in the corridor, with the particular recklessness of a person who has decided that the normal rules of professional discretion no longer apply to them because the normal rules of professional protection have just been withdrawn. What he said was recorded. What he said traveled. He said the 4 runs were not his fault. He said the game plan he had been given was flawed from the beginning, designed around assumptions about how the opposing lineup would approach the situation that turned out to be incorrect. He said he had tried to adjust in real time to what he was actually seeing, rather than mechanically executing a plan that wasn't working, and that this adjustment, this act of competitive intelligence, was being mischaracterized as insubordination. And then he said the thing that stopped the room. He said the problem had started earlier in the game. That the foundation on which the 6th inning had been built, the defensive positioning, the pitch framing, the fundamental trust between the pitcher and the plate that allows a plan to function, had been compromised before he even took the mound. He said the problem had started with Ohtani. The specific claim was this, that Ohtani, pitching in the earlier innings, had established a pattern of pitch usage that the opposing lineup had identified and adjusted to. That this adjustment, made by professional hitters doing exactly what professional hitters are paid to do, had remained in place when Hart took over. That he had inherited a situation shaped by the innings before him and been evaluated as if he had arrived on a blank slate. He stopped short of saying Ohtani had done anything wrong. The language was careful enough to avoid that direct accusation while pointing unmistakably in that direction. It was the kind of statement that is technically deniable and practically undeniable. The kind that a person constructs when they want the implication to land without accepting full responsibility for having made it. The clubhouse heard about it within minutes. The reaction was not loud. Loud would have been easier to manage, easier to contain, easier to process and move past. The reaction was quiet, the specific quiet of a group of people who have just heard something that violates a code they all understand and none of them needed to have explained. You don't do this. Whatever happened on the field. Whatever the circumstances of your departure. Whatever the grievance that feels, in the raw immediate aftermath of a difficult moment, like it justifies anything. You don't put that name in that sentence. Ohtani was at his birthday party when it reached him. He had left the clubhouse 40 minutes after the game ended, later than usual, having stayed to speak with the pitching staff and review footage from his own innings in the particular methodical way that never varies regardless of what else is happening around him. He had changed. He had made his way to the space where his teammates had assembled the decorations and the cake and the 2 miniature jerseys that had already, earlier that evening, produced the closest thing to tears anyone in that room had ever seen from him. He was holding his youngest child when someone showed him the phone. He read it once. Set the phone down. Looked at nothing in particular for a moment, the middle distance, the specific location that people look at when they are deciding how to receive something. Then he handed the child carefully to Mamiko. He excused himself from the room. Briefly, quietly, with the same undemonstrative control he brings to everything. He was gone for perhaps 6 minutes. What happened in those 6 minutes, where he went, who if anyone he spoke to, what the 6 minutes cost him, remains private. When he returned, he took his child back from Mamiko. Settled back into the celebration. Accepted a piece of cake from a teammate who made a joke about the frosting that produced a genuine, if brief, response. He did not mention Hart. Not that evening. Not in the immediate days that followed. He didn't need to. Because Roberts had already said everything that needed to be said. 20 minutes after the final out. With an empty locker. The official DFA announcement arrived the following morning with the standard organizational language, thanking Hart for his contributions, wishing him well in future endeavors, the formulaic courtesy that organizations extend even to departures that are anything but courteous in their underlying reality. Hart's representatives issued a statement expressing disagreement with the decision and confidence in their client's ability to contribute elsewhere. It contained no reference to the corridor conversation. No reference to Ohtani. No acknowledgement of the line that had been crossed in the 40 minutes between an empty locker and a reporter's recording device. The retraction, such as it was, came without apology. It simply stopped. The way fires stop when the thing feeding them has been removed. Inside the Dodgers facility, the birthday decorations were still partially up the following morning. A balloon. The table that had held the jerseys. Small evidence of the evening that had been interrupted and then, carefully, resumed. Someone had saved a piece of cake. It sat in the refrigerator with a name written on the container in marker. Shohei.